The sun rose like a blade over the scorched earth of southern Italy. The air smelled of iron and dust. On the horizon, a living spot was moving, 86,000 men marching under the banner of the Roman eagle, each step echoing the arrogance of an empire that believed it was invincible. None of them imagined that, in a few hours, that floor would become the largest cemetery in antiquity. It is said that the gods abandoned Rome that day. Others swear that it was the intelligence of one man, a foreigner with dark eyes and a ruthless mind, that destroyed the pride of the Republic. His name was Hannibal Barca, the son of a blood oath. He didn't fight for glory, he fought for revenge. In front of him, the Roman army advanced like a sea of bronze. Behind him, hidden among the dust, a plan born of hatred and genius awaited the moment to reveal itself. That dawn of August 2nd, 216 BC. It wouldn't be just another battle. It would be the ultimate lesson in how the mind can subdue force and how trust can become a trap. As the heat rose and the ravens were already beginning to circle above the field, the history of Rome was about to be rewritten in blood. If this scene gave you goosebumps, imagine what's next. Every second of this story reveals the price of arrogance and the power of a mind that changed the fate of empires. Before continuing, please unlike now. This shows YouTube that you love this kind of epic story and helps your channel grow. Sign up so you don't miss the upcoming battles that Rome tried to erase from the records. Ring the bell, because every week a new war, a new betrayal, and a new forgotten hero are reborn here. He's part of this legion of history lovers. Comment there, Rome never forgets, and show that you also carry the spirit of those who have defied the impossible. 3 years before that tragic dawn, a young general of only 26 years old was going through the impossible. Between snow-capped mountains and skin-torn winds, Hannibal Barca led an army of elephants, horsemen, and warriors from all lands. What moved him was not ambition. It was an oath he had taken when he was still a child. In front of his father, the legendary Hamilcar, he had sworn before the gods that he would never be a friend of Rome. Every step over the Alps was paid for with blood and ice. Half of his men fell, crushed by avalanches or killed by hostile tribes, but those who survived arrived in Italy as wild beasts forged in hell. Spaniards, Gauls, Africans, and Numidians formed an army as diverse as it was lethal. Rome, accustomed to fighting predictable enemies, was not prepared for a commander who thought like a strategist and attacked like a predator. The winter of 218 BC covered northern Italy with mist and biting cold. On the banks of the Trebia River, the Roman consul Tiberius Sempronius Longus believed he had found the perfect chance to crush the Carthaginian invader. 40,000 legionnaires awaited the sign of glory, not imagining that they were about to march to hell. Hannibal watched them from the top of a hill, silent like a patient hunter. At dawn, he ordered a small force to provoke the Romans and retreat. Enraged, Longo threw his entire army at the enemy, but to reach it, the Romans had to cross the frozen river. The icy water cut the skin, the armor weighed down, and the force of the currents broke the ranks. It was then that Hannibal attacked. From both flanks, his cavalry fell on the Romans like hungry wolves. From the rear, a hidden detachment emerged, sealing the siege. 20,000 soldiers were slaughtered, blood tinged the ice. The spring of 217 BC dawned with thick fog over Lake Trasimeno. The silent waters reflected a grey sky, with no omen of the horror to come. The consul Gaius Flaminius, impulsive and hungry for revenge, led his army along a narrow trail between the lake and the hills, ignoring the warnings of his scouts. Hannibal was already waiting for him. He hid thousands of men on the slopes, covered by bushes and morning fog. As the Romans entered the passage, the sound of trumpets cut through the air, and all hell broke loose. From all sides, Carthaginian warriors descended from the hills. The attack was so sudden that the legionnaires were not even able to form battle lines. Caught between enemy spears and the deep waters of the lake, they were slaughtered like cornered prey. 15,000 Romans died without understanding what had happened. Flaminius's body disappeared among the dead. Rome, for the first time in centuries, felt real fear. The disaster at Lake Trasimeno plunged Rome into despair. The city, accustomed to conquest, now trembled before an enemy that seemed invincible. The Senate met in panic, mothers wept in the streets, and the gods seemed silent. It was then that Quintus Fabius Maximus appeared, a man of cold temper and calculating mind. Appointed dictator, he knew that facing Hannibal head-on was suicide. His strategy ran counter to Roman pride: avoid open battles, wear down the enemy, cut off supplies, and destroy bridges. He became a shadow, chasing Hannibal through hills and valleys, never being fooled by his taunts. The soldiers called him the informer, mocking his prudence. But Fabio understood something that the others did not. Fury leads to defeat, and patience wins wars. Rome, however, despised waiting. The city that had built empires with sword and fire did not tolerate the slowness of caution. The thirst for glory would speak again, and it would be costly. The Roman people, enraged by the passivity of Fabius Maximus, cried out for vengeance. "Rome does not flee," they shouted in the squares. The Senate gave in to the pressure and, in 216 BC, decided to assemble the largest army ever formed in the history of the Republic: 8 Roman legions, plus thousands of Italian allies, more than 80,000 men marching to restore a nation's wounded pride. In command, 2 consuls with opposing views: Lucius Aemilius Paulus, experienced and prudent, and Gaius Terence Varro, impetuous and proud. They would take turns in command day after day, a fatal mistake. While Paul saw in Hannibal a dangerous genius, Varro saw only an exhausted mercenary. When the news came that Hannibal had taken the fortress of Cannae, Varro saw it as the perfect stage for his glory. Rome marched under an unrelenting sun, convinced that it would win by force of numbers. None of them knew that they were marching straight into the most perfect trap ever devised by a human being. As the Roman army marched toward Cannae, Hannibal watched from the top of a hill, calm as one contemplating a chess piece. He had chosen the terrain with surgical precision: narrow plains, winds that blew dust against the faces of the Romans, and enough room for the movement of his cavalry. Every detail of the camp was part of his trap. During the night, he gathered his officers by the light of the torches. He explained the plan in a firm voice. He would put his weakest troops, newly recruited Gauls and Hispanics, at the center, feigning weakness. When the Romans advanced, this center would slowly retreat, while their African wings, veteran and cold as steel, would surround the flanks. At the same time, his Numidian and Iberian cavalry would destroy the Roman horsemen and return from the bottom, closing the siege. It would be a living trap, a deadly embrace. His generals listened to him in silence. Some trembled, others smiled. Hannibal only said, "Tomorrow Rome will learn the price of arrogance." The August sun rose mercilessly over the plains of Cannae. The hot wind kicked up dust and made the air burn like fire. On one side, Hannibal, mounted on his horse, watched his army take position with the serenity of someone who already saw destiny being fulfilled. On the other, Varro, inflamed by speeches of glory, formed the legions into a compact mass of bronze and shields, a human wall of 80,000 soldiers ready to crush the enemy. The blasting of the trumpets tore through the silence. The earth shook under the Roman advance. On the other side, Hannibal's Gauls and Spaniards moved like colorful waves of fury and courage. They shouted, they hit their swords, and the collision was brutal. For long minutes, only the sound of metal and the screams of the dying dominated the field. It seemed that Rome was winning. The Carthaginian center gave way, retreated, bowed under the weight of the legion. But that retreat was not a defeat. It was an invitation. The hook had hooked the proudest empire in the world. The heat was stifling, and the ground shook under the weight of tens of thousands of Roman sandals. Hannibal's center continued to retreat, exactly as planned, drawing the enemy into the heart of the camp. By the time the Romans realized it, it was too late. They were compressed into a funnel of death. Then all hell broke loose. From the sides, the African veterans advanced with firm shields and gleaming spears. The Roman formation began to deform, the space between men disappearing. Shouts of command were mixed with supplications. From the top of a hill, Hannibal raised his arm. That was the signal. His Numidian cavalry, which had already destroyed Rome's horsemen, returned behind the enemy's back. Within seconds, the Romans were completely surrounded, crushed on all sides. There was nowhere to run. Discipline, once the pride of Rome, was now its prison. Swords beat with no room for the blow. The air reeked of blood and fear. Men were suffocated by the crowd itself. Within hours, the most powerful army on earth ceased to exist. When the sun set over the plains of Cannae, the ground was covered with bodies. The blood flowed in small streams, mixed with the dust and sweat of 80,000 erased lives. The wind carried with it the sound of crows and the distant murmur of those who were still dying. Rome, the empire that had never accepted defeat, had been destroyed in a single day. But out of the tragedy, something greater was born. The massacre did not destroy the Roman spirit, it hardened it. Instead of surrendering, Rome rose again with a cold, methodical fury. He studied Hannibal's every move, learned from his own fall, and turned shame into a lesson. Decades later, the same descendants of the vanquished at Cannae would cross the sea and destroy Carthage forever. The Battle of Cannae wasn't just the triumph of a genius over an empire. It was the everlasting reminder that pride blinds, but defeat teaches. The day Rome bled was also the day he learned never to bow again. Hannibal won the battle. Rome conquered history.